The following podcast is being brought to you by the Defy Life Podcast Network.
Welcome to Aftergate, powered by the Defy Life Network.
Are y'all ready?
Aftergate is a podcast series highlighting Colgate alumni of color in their professional endeavors aftergate.
Are y'all ready?
Aftergate is hosted by Alvin Glimpf, aka Al, and Herman Dubois, aka Jerry.
Are y'all ready?
We are doing Aftergate because Colgate University has produced innovators who have changed the world every day, yet many alumni of color and the mainstream Colgate community are unaware of the amazing accomplishments of alums of color.
Are y'all ready? Welcome to another episode of Aftergate, this amazing weekly podcast where we have the honor of interviewing alumni of color from Colgate University, highlight their accomplishments post-graduation. We have an amazing time as we dip and dive and check out how they were on campus, kind of getting a sense of what their life was like before campus. So it's been a great run. We've had some amazing conversations. And this one right here, I have a feeling is going to go up with one of the all-timers. I just got that sense, my man. I'm feeling good coming into this one, right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
But before we do that, let me introduce my co-host, Mr. Herman Dubois, aka Jerry. What is the deal, my man? How are you doing?
All is well, Hermano. All is well. Here in the Sunshine State, just taking it all in.
Yes.
This time of year is exciting. Start of the school year, projects, fiscal year contracts. So ripping and running and excited about what's on the horizon for this year.
Yeah, all is good down here. Had a really good weekend. Have a lot of good projects coming on board. Professionally, things are going well. I know things are going well as I keep tabs of Hope Murals and what y'all are doing around the Sunshine State and beyond. So appreciate that. But I'm a little excited because I want to talk to this man right here. So is it all right that I invite this brother onto the show? Can I get your blessings on that, my man?
Let's do it. He already pre-qualifies for the Legends of Aftergate, episodes.
Correct.
So and that's just on paper. That's just on paper. Wait till we really get into it.
Oh man, this is one of them shows people are gonna remember. Aftergate listeners, my family, co-host, I'd like to bring on to the Aftergate podcast, bring him in the room, brother Erick Bowen, class of 1984.
Yeah.
What's up, guys? What's up?
Man, it's all good. How are you doing today?
Oh, I'm doing great. Great. I got the same weather you got, Al. So it's just lovely over here.
It's lovely over here.
Are you in Atlanta?
Yeah, I'm in Peachtree City, Georgia. I'm like about
okay. I know
20 minutes from Al.
That leads me right into the part about how we met, because as fate would have it, in this big old universe, two Colgate brothers just happened to be working out one morning at the same YMCA.
No way.
And as I only come in there once every 365 weeks. But as weeks, I walk, not days, weeks. As I'm in there, I'm rocking my Colgate t-shirt, and this elderly white guy comes up to me and is like, you went to Colgate? Yeah, I went to Colgate. He said, wow, there's another guy who went to Colgate who goes here. I'm like, really? He's like, and because again, I'm like, and he doesn't say a black man. He just said another guy went to Colgate. He's a member here as well. I'm like, okay, cool. One day get to know him, right? Give me a name and everything. I go, I'm doing my workout, push-ups, sit-ups, whatever. About 15 minutes later, he comes up to me. Hey, he's here. I'm like, he's here? He's like, yeah, the guy I was telling you about. He's here right now. I'm like, okay. Now, mind you, he didn't tell me what ethnicity he was, so I don't know what I'm about to get into. But then he said he founded something, the Harlem Renaissance Center. I was like, What?
What? Right.
Whoa. Oh, wait. That guy's here? He's like, yeah, come here. He walks me over to the window. He points him out. He's in the pool. He's like
Doing his
swimming,
laps.
getting his stuff on. And he's like, yeah, all right, I'll talk to you later. So finally, afterwards, we get a chance to connect. And I find out that true indeed, this brother that we're about to talk to is Colgate graduate, founded HRCs, knows a lot of the same people we know in terms of the history of this, right? People that have already been on this podcast already, and lives in the same county I live in.
Mm-hmm. Who would have thunk it?
Who would have thunk it? But again, to talk about why this Aftergate thing is powerful in terms of connecting and leveraging the resources of who we are. At the time, we were just kind of kicking off the podcast. So I tell them about the podcast. But to be honest, my whole spirit of engaging and trying to connect with him and keep in contact really came out of the spirit we were in 6-7 months ago about our podcast. Couple of conversations later, couple of lunches, and he got to meet Gina, another Colgate alum.
Nice.
Right. We kind of make some of these connections, and tonight he's on his podcast tonight to share the story. So
beautiful.
Yeah. Hey, Al, can I share my side of that story?
Please.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So like I'm a regular at the Y. I swim practically every day, and
365 days a year, Al.
For the most
Not
part.
weeks.
For the most part, right? And the cat that I was talking about, Phil, he's like, like he's my swimming buddy. He's like the mayor of the Y, Phil. And so Phil actually knows the story about HRC because he always talks to me and we always share. So I tell him about my Colgate days and my experiences. So he comes to me and he tells me, hey, there's this guy from Colgate here. And I said, meanwhile, I'm just trying to get my swim on because I'm just trying to get out. And so when I'm thinking about it, I say, oh, this is some white brother, and I don't get me wrong. I don't mind meeting, a white alumni or anything like that, but I wasn't super excited about it. So I asked Phil, and I could talk to Phil like this, right? I said, Phil, is he a brother? He said, yeah. I said, oh, okay. I said, well, listen, Phil. I said, do me a favor, because I'm trying to get my laps in. Go up there and just tell him that, I founded HRC. And so he went up there and he came back and he was excited. He said, yeah, the brother's gonna wait for you, this, that, and the other. And to be honest, I still wasn't, I was like, okay, well, he knows this cat knows about HRC. So I'm like saying, okay, maybe he'll be cool. You know what I mean? Because I've met some cats from Colgate who they may know HRC and they may be, they may have gone, but they may not have been really involved in what was going on at Colgate. Mm-hmm. So I took it, and the next thing I know, I come out, I meet Al, and he's telling me about the podcast and when he went and so forth. I'm like, oh no. And next thing I know, he's trying to hit me up to do the podcast. Right.
Wait, was that an oh no, like a good oh no, or like kind of run?
Well, kind of. It was like a oh no, because to be honest, and I think Al got the feel for this. Mm-hmm. I enjoyed my Colgate experience in my days, but Colgate was still, it was still a white institution. It was in Hamilton, New York, and even though I put a lot of work and effort into trying to change things at Colgate and make Colgate feel more like home to me. Once I left, I just put it in the rearview mirror, and I kept going. So,
to be honest, like he said, he was pretty clear about how he viewed Colgate in the past. And while I'm sharing, this is what we're doing, this is what I've been up to, blah. He was like, oh, okay, that's cool. But I didn't feel like, to lean in, and I'm like, but I get it, and what was so, I guess, aligned with so many of the conversations we're having in terms of, I get it. I appreciate that we all are in different spaces and have different understandings and perspectives when it comes to Colgate. So it was like, all right, I get it, but I'm still going to give him the opportunity if he wants to learn more, do more, to know that there's a lot of people who really value your contribution to
And
that campus. And that's
and
really what
actually,
I wanted to
and
compare.
actually, and actually, actually, Al and German. I mean, what did it for me is listening to your podcast
Mm,
and listening to other people's experiences about, HRC and their campus life and so forth. And I said, okay, that gave me, that I said, okay, let me, I could do this. I could come aboard. I mean, I think it's important for people to understand the history, to
okay.
know, to know not only the public rationale for HRC, but what was the personal rationale for HRC.
Class of 1984, Colgate. That means you graduate high school 1980. So if you could take us back to those years, give us a sense of what's life like for you. Where are you from? How did you learn about Colgate? What do you remember about the 70s as you're going into Colgate? Give us a sense of what life is like for you and in the world before you even step on campus.
Okay, so I went to high school from 1976 to 1980. I went to LaSalle Academy, a Catholic high school
Mm-hmm.
in the
Mm-hmm.
borough, in the Bowery of Manhattan.
Mm-hmm.
Mostly Italians and Irish. You had some blacks and some Hispanics going there. LaSalle was an okay school, not really great academically. It was more known for its sports. Um, and so in that period of time, you had Jimmy Carter as president,
Mm.
and you also had the Bakke decision, the reverse discrimination decision
Hmm.
that happened. That's like when reverse discrimination just came into, that's when they were first making
Existence.
that argument. Yeah.
Hmm.
Um, and so actually my freshman, and so let me back up a little bit. So I was raised by a single parent. It was my mother. My mother's from Jamaica. She was raised in Wales. My father's from the United States. He was, a southern brother. But to be honest, I really didn't know him. I really didn't know him. Um, so I was raised principally by my mom, and she didn't go to college. No one in my family had went to college. And to be honest, my freshman and sophomore year, I wasn't even thinking. Well, I was thinking about college, but I was thinking about getting there, on a sports related scholarship. I didn't even think academically I could make it into college. Um, and to be honest, my grades weren't great my freshman and sophomore year. Now, this is the important piece of this story. So after my sophomore year, I got recruited to be part of this program called the Archbishop Leadership Project. The Archbishop Leadership Project was what they did was they recruited 16 young Black men from the New York City area who they thought had the potential for leadership. And they would take you on weekend retreats. You would have discussions like respect, excellence, and the retreats were all run by young professional brothers. I mean, lawyers, doctors, professors, and so forth. And you would engage in public speaking, you would engage in debates and so forth. And you would have to read a book a week about your history and then have a discussion about that book every single week. And then and then like in your senior year, they would take you on either your senior or your junior. I can't quite remember. In the fall, they would take you on college trips, and not just college trips to anywhere. You would go to these elite colleges, Harvard, Brown, Wesleyan, MIT, and so forth. And you would do overnights there, and you would stay on campus, and you would check out those campuses, and you would learn what it took to get into institutions like that, like those institutions. So it was really through that program that all of a sudden my grades just turned around, because they showed a way out for me. They showed and demonstrated that there's another way for me to get out other than sports and otherwise. Don't get me wrong, I still play ball. still ran track and all that stuff, but I got into the books. And my grades turned around. My SAT score was okay, et cetera, et cetera. And some of the best friends that I made came out of that program called the Archbishop Leadership Project. And just as a heads up, because there's an important brother that I want to mention who was also part of that program, who went to Colgate the same time I went to Colgate. His name is Ken Frazier. We both came into Colgate the same time in the 80s, but he graduated in 85 and I graduated in 84. So I don't know. So so through that program, when I applied to college, my guidance counselor at LaSalle, he gave me a list of colleges where Colgate wasn't even on that list.
Wow.
But the Archbishop Leadership Project, they gave me a list of colleges where Colgate, Wesleyan, Brown, Columbia, and all those schools, they were on that list. And that's the list I used to apply to schools. And so,
question for you, brother. Just to go
ahead.
back a little bit, how did you end up at LaSalle? Because that's also got to be a little bit of a unique, it's not a school that a lot of people even know about. Never mind, brothers, Latino or African American. Yeah,
I went to a parochial elementary school. When it was grades K through 8th, but I went there starting in 6th grade. It was called St. Jean the Baptist. So I was already in the parochial system in New York City.
Mm-hmm. Yep,
so when it came to high schools, I was looking at Catholic high schools.
Those were your feeder patterns, yeah.
Yes.
Got it. Okay.
Can I back up a second and just tell you one other thing that I think is important for the background?
Yep.
So in two of those overnights, we went to Wesleyan University. We did an overnight, and we went to Brown University. Now at Wesleyan University, they had what they called the Malcolm X House, which is a residential living center principally for Black and Brown students. And I got the privilege of staying there overnight during my campus visit. And then the same thing at Brown University, they have this residential facility called Harambe House, also a residential living center principally for Black and Brown. And I also got to stay there overnight as well in my campus trip. And the one thing I noticed in both of those universities, Wesleyan and Brown, the Black and Brown students seem to be so much more united. The schools seem to be so much more supportive of those students than at some of the other universities I went to. So keep that in mind, because that was fresh in my memory. That was fresh in my mind when I went to Colgate, and also in Ken's mind as well, because we had the same experience.
What's really interesting is my two mentors here in Atlanta.
Yeah.
One went to Wesleyan, one went to Brown, Black males, and were both there at the time that you're referencing. So
what years?
They're they're about 10 years older than me. So I'm gonna put them in the class of, actually, he just had his, I have to do the math. What are we, 30? Just had his 40th. So that's what, 1982?
Okay, so he might have knew some of the Archbishop Leadership brothers.
Because you had exposure to so many of these other institutions that many of us maybe hadn't even heard about, never mind visited. What made you go to Colgate, or where else, or where else would you have gone? Because for a lot of our guests in the past, Colgate wasn't even in the top ranking, and then it ends up being the school of choice. Yeah. Okay. I see.
The money, baby. Show me the money, and that's what Colgate did. Now, because to be honest, when I also applied to Howard, I applied to Boston University, and actually Howard was my top choice. And I got into all those schools. But Howard didn't show me any love. They didn't give me any money. And the same thing with Boston University. They didn't give me any money. But Colgate showed me some love when it came to the money, and they were, it was basically a full ride.
Wow.
Got it. To talk about your transition from LaSalle to Colgate, What do you want to highlight about that? What were the challenges? What were the victories?
Let's see. Well, my transition coming from LaSalle to Colgate, it wasn't, I knew about the academic rigor that was coming at Colgate. I definitely didn't get it at LaSalle, but the Archbishop Leadership Project kind of prepared me. They kind of, I had an idea of what it was going to be like, the intensity. But at the same time, this was my first time being away from home. And that first year I took full advantage of being away from home. And as a result, my grades suffered. My grades tremendously suffered. And I barely made it through that first year. I think both me and Kenny, we barely made it through that first year, but we managed. That was the toughest transition. It wasn't, socially, it wasn't an issue for me. And to be honest, academically, that wasn't really the issue. It was just me putting in the work, me needing to put in the work. And it took me that first year, it took me, I guess, getting out of my system, being away from home the first time and having that freedom.
Where'd you live freshman year?
Where did I live? Well, both me and Kenny roomed, and we roomed in a quad. I'm trying to remember where it was. It wasn't Stillman. I think it was next to Stillman. I'm trying to remember what it was called.
Andrews?
Maybe it was Andrews. I think it was Andrews. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we lived there. We lived in a quad. We had our own room together. And there was these two other cats in another room, both white guys, both skiers. And they were in another room. We got along pretty good, all four of us, we got along great. But yeah, that's where I resided that freshman year.
Well, run us through your 4-year residential run.
Okay, so let's see. Andrews the first year, and then it was West Hall. West Hall, my sophomore, junior, and I think my senior year.
Wow.
All those. And I had a single starting my sophomore year, which was huge.
And you were up the hill already.
Yeah.
Extracurriculars?
Oh God. I could go down the list. Okay, extracurriculars. First of all, I walked onto Colgate's basketball team completely out of shape, made the team, but realized that, I just couldn't continue to do the practices and be a student if I wanted to remain at Colgate. So I had to give that up. I was a disc jockey on WRCU all 4 years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I was involved in the Black Student Union, We Funk, both my freshman, all 4 years really, but my freshman year, I was involved just as a member, both in the Black Student Union and We Funk. I worked at the Culture Center.
Okay.
All 4 years. That was a huge blessing right there. Let's see. I also did, we worked with the admissions office in helping them to recruit other students of color my freshman year as well as my sophomore year.
Wow.
So that was it for my freshman year. And then my sophomore year is when I started taking on the leadership roles. I was a leader. I was a student leader in the BSU, and We Funk, I became the president, and I'm trying to think. And it kind of took off from there, so it was like my freshman year was just me getting the lay of the land. My sophomore year and my sophomore, junior, and senior, that's when I kind of figured out the system and just started to just get involved in trying to make changes.
Before we get into HRC, I'm curious to hear what's the perception of We Funk at the time when you were on campus? Because I'm assuming it had recently been formed. I mean, it couldn't have been around that long at that time. So I'm just curious, what's the students' understanding of what this organization purpose, history, why
Mission.
mission?
We Funk, the brothers that I knew who I think started We Funk were Sheldon Paris, who passed away. He was Crusher, known as Crusher, and George Ingram. Those two brothers were involved in We Funk. And basically, what I knew of We Funk back then was just that it was, for us to get together and throw parties. They formed the organization so that way they can go through the student association to get funds for parties. And at that time, we were borrowing stereos and speakers and so forth for parties. When I came the president, I said, later for this, we're going to ask the student association to buy the equipment, as well as to buy a locker to store it and so forth. And so that's what we did. Let me give you a nice little story about We Funk. So one of the things I also did as president, I had a Wesleyan connection. So I had friends who went to Wesleyan, and Wesleyan had this, they had this event. I want to think it was called Jamboree or something like that. Anyway, I put in the budget a line item for us to take a trip to Wesleyan with the equipment. And I said that what we were going to do was that we were going to do a battle, a DJ battle, knowing that they didn't know anything about what that was or what that involved. And really, we just wanted a trip up to Wesleyan, just to be part of, the festival. And so, that's what we did. We got a line item in the budget. We got it, and we took about five of us up to Wesleyan for that event, and just to sort of reconnect and network with some of the people at Wesleyan.
Absolutely.
Would love to hear the story about HRC now.
Walk us through, how did it become the brainchild? We know a little bit about your Brown and Wesleyan exposure, but there's a lot of steps in between visiting as a senior in high school and a building on campus.
I think there's people who have come, who've been guests on this show, who would have been on campus after you would have graduated, and they share the place HRC had in their resilience and persistence on that campus.
I know, man. I was listening to your podcast. I'm like, there's quite a few. I was like, yes. I was like, wow.
And many of us don't know the history, don't know the story, don't know how and why. So that's why I think this is going to be fascinating to hear this story, and then we can just make these connections.
There have been so many testimonies to how Colgate and HRC were played out in their overall experience, right? From a salvation perspective, straight up. It was about survival. But then we have the other extreme, not necessarily having been on the podcast, but because of Alvin and I's involvement with current students of color. We've had some interns work with us in the recent years that were sisters of color on campus. The missed storytelling opportunity of why HRC even existed has been so mutilated, and in some cases not even told or dismantled, that there's an uprising now, a resurgence of what I would call, in all honesty, a 2.0 of HRC, and the window of opportunity to actually with the 40 plus years of amazing experiences that HRC provided, take that and now do it better. So no pressure, but I just want you to know that you're speaking to an audience, you're speaking to a very vast audience, and I'm
Gotcha.
concerned about those who don't realize the value that HRC has had in the lives of so many people.
Let me tell you. So I don't know how many of your audience truly know the history, and I don't know what stories have been told about the history of HRC, but it didn't. We didn't have to do any protesting. We didn't have to do any sit-ins. We didn't have to take over any buildings to get Harlem Renaissance Center. So when me and Kenny walked on the Colgate campus, we still had the Wesleyan and Brown experience fresh in our mind, right? Keep in mind, the administrator over the Office of Supportive Services, I believe that's what it was called, the Scholars Program, was Nacio Giles. You know, Nacio Giles is a real OG.
A Colgate alum.
Class of 1970, right? So we used to go into Nacio's office like all the time, talking to him about what's going on in the campus, what can we do to try to make changes, do things, and so forth. And I was always talking to him about, hey, we need to have a residential center principally for Black and Brown students, similar to what Wesleyan and Brown had and so forth. And I was doing that from day one. So I was constantly in Nacio's ear about this. Well, anyway, one day, Nacio comes to me and he says, hey, Eric, I think I know how you can get that residential living center we've been talking about. And I said, well, go ahead, tell me. He said, well, there's been this proposal that's been put across my desk about themed residential living centers. And he said, some students have put together proposals for like things like Europa House and French House. And immediately when he said that, I said, the light bulb went out. I said, oh, yes.
Mm-hmm.
And so what we did is that we put together a proposal where it would be a residential living center where people would learn and appreciate the Black experience in America. And we knew that the administration wouldn't go for like an all Black and Brown residential living center. So the way that the proposal, the paper proposal, was that 50% of the residential living center would be Black and Brown students and 50% would be majority students. And we called it, now get this, our initial name for the proposal was Harlem House. Mm-hmm. So when we wrote up the proposal and we gave it to Nacio, I think Nacio like gasped when he saw the name. He was like, Harlem House. But see, he knew the type of brothers that me and Kenny were. So it was me, Ken Frazier. We're the co-founders of it. We put this together, right? And of course, with Nacio's help, right?
Right.
But Nacio, I guess Nacio was happy that it was Harlem House because he was probably saying, "Dad, I'm just happy they didn't name it something like Black Liberation House or something like that,
Louis Farrakhan House.
Yeah, exactly. And I got a story about that one too. But anyway, but yeah, so we put together the proposal, and we then had to go around campus to sell it to the administration as well as to basically the student body. So we would go into classes, student groups, and we would basically tell them what the proposal was. And we knew what the main objection would be. The main objection we thought would be that, oh, here it is, you're going to have Black and Brown students, self-segregating themselves. Mm-hmm. And so instead of having more sharing of experiences, you would have less, because you would have less students of color to disperse amongst the various residential living centers, because they would be all concentrated in principally like one residential living center, Harlem Renaissance Center. But what we explained to them was that in the current setup, the way that you have, being that there's so few Black and Brown students on campus, you're dispersing them amongst the various residential living centers where you may have 5% of the residential living center being students of color and 95% being the majority. And I'm saying you're not achieving integration with those numbers. You're more likely to achieve assimilation, because when you have that sort of power dynamic, you're decentivizing people from really expressing their views. You know what I mean? Because it's just, the numbers just aren't there. So we tell them that you're more likely to get a true organic sharing of ideas by having a 50-50 situation. And so that's how we sold. That's how we were selling Harlem House. Now, Naciel told us, he said, listen, you guys are doing a great job. But I think, they're going to probably agree to give you the house, but under one condition, that you change the name. And so he said, but he said, but word of advice, stick to your guns stick to your guns about the name, like as if you're very, like you're very adamant about the name, to get them to just focus just on the name. And then when they finally approve it, they'll probably approve it based upon the condition that you change the name. And then you just flip the script on them and you just say, okay, no problem, we'll do it. And that's exactly what went down.
Yo, that's OG advice right there.
Yeah, that was.
That is mentorship 101 for those of y'all who missed that.
Yeah. And so when they approved it, we said, fine, no problem, we'll change it. Harlem Renaissance Center, stamp, done. And that's how we got the house. In fact, if you look at the 1983 yearbook, because we went, around selling it as Harlem House, the yearbook, when they printed it out as Harlem House instead of Harlem Renaissance Center. And the initial house was housed in West Hall in the center of the quad, and we had 2 floors. Now, I think the reason why the 2 floors was to give that 50-50 percentage. And so I heard like Christine Dibble talk about, they had like a small space in the corner and stuff like that. No, there was a reason why it was only granted 2 floors, and it was to try to get that mixture, that sharing of ideas. And when and as soon as we came in the house, we hung up the Huey P. Newton poster.
Right.
With him sitting in the chair with the rifle and the spear. We hung up the Malcolm X poster. We were just like, we were ecstatic. Yeah. We were ecstatic when we got the house. And just also, so that was the public rationale. Now let me give you the personal why it was that me and Kenny really wanted the house. So, keep in mind where you sleep and where you eat are very intimate spaces, right? And in those spaces, you just want to be able to relax and be yourself without judgment, without anything. Those are the spaces where you kind of go to sort of recharge your battery, so to speak, where you can just exist. You know what I mean? Just being yourself. And so we wanted a place where we could just exist, where we could just be ourselves and not have to worry about being judged. We wanted a place where we knew, even if you didn't live in HRC, just a place where people could always know that they could come, that they could just be, their authentic selves, where they can just come, relax, and sort of just be able to recharge their battery. Because, sometimes a lot of times at Colgate, particularly my freshman year, I felt like I was always on. Even my sophomore year, I felt like I was always on. Even though I had a single, my music could be overheard, my conversations could be overheard. Every time I walked out of my room to the shower, I think, I just felt that sometimes my physical presence just seemed to, engender fear or discomfort amongst some people. So I wanted a place, an environment where you could just feel comfortable, where you could be unapologetically Black.
So as you talk about, you don't have to live there and still could find an appeal and sanctuary in that space. That's definitely my story as one who never lived in HRC, but lived in KED my freshman year, but spent most of my waking hours outside of class and running the campus, hanging out, feeling safe, feeling in a place where I'm familiar and comfortable around my friends and building relationships in HRC, expressing my Blackness with no type of fear of repercussions or questioning. And it's just, look, I can just be at home here. So again, the value spoke more than whether you lived there or not. It was just understood as, look, you want to relax, you need to let off some steam around people who get it, who understand. HRC.
Yeah, I think it also, my hope is that what it also did was just gave people comfort to be more expressive as a whole, campus wide. You know what I mean? Just the fact, because you had an HRC on campus, and hopefully that HRC represented to them a place, but it also represented the fact that the university was supportive of
Blackness.
of our experiences. Yes.
Yeah.
Would you say that support from the university had a lot to do with what was happening in current events, and there was this sort of post civil rights, I guess, movement to some extent around the country to become more diverse and inclusive?
No, it wasn't,
no.
Brother. But it wasn't.
Okay.
Let me tell you something, because keep in mind the era that we're in.
Mm-hmm.
We're in the 1980s. Reagan is the president.
War on drugs.
You had the Bakke decision. Reagan's the president from 1980 to 1988. That's kind of like the era of Trump. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so you had a lot of push. You had a lot of people pushing back, and a lot of people, claiming reverse discrimination and so forth. I think, and I think, to the university credit, they recognized that there was this going on in the country, and that a lot of these students would be potential leaders coming out of Colgate, and that probably there needed to be some things that needed to change, in order to change people's thoughts and opinions and ideas. So I think that's, I think, to the university's credit, they actually took a bold move in improving HRC. But at the same time, there were cats on Colgate, that were different, that maybe they hadn't seen in a while. So, you had a lot of vocal people.
So put it in context. So West Hall, 2 floors, become HRC. Is this your senior year?
This is my junior year.
Your junior year. So now you get the physical space. What kind of programming are you, besides the posters and all? Are y'all doing any programming, or was it just really residential and that was it?
Just principally residential, and that was it. Because keep in mind that West Hall, there wasn't really a space. You know what I mean? There wasn't a space for any sort of programming. And to be quite honest, man, we were just so ecstatic. But you know what? You didn't need to do any programming. HRC just by itself, just its existence, was just a strong statement and just meant so much to people. At least, you know, my hope is that it meant a lot to us, and my hope is that it meant a lot to people going forward.
Within the community of color that were on campus at the time, did they flock to it? Was it like a selection at 50-50? Did every student of color at that time become part of HRC?
Not every student, but you had quite a few. In fact, something that you guys probably don't know, because I think I heard in previous podcasts, you talk about the first like Black or Brown Student Association president. I forgot when you're talking about the first Black Student Association president was in 1983 or 84, and that was Jeff Boone, who was actually, I knew Jeff in elementary school at St. Jean the Baptiste, and he became the first student association president of color, you know, Black student, who was the first student association. And that was in 1983, 84.
Thank you for correcting that, because I actually got a text from an alum following that episode where she said, hey, just want to give you you know, the facts. I know someone, you know, said this might have been, but for the record, he was the first.
Yes, he was.
And I appreciate you correcting that record. So as you talk about, Jerry talked about what was the reaction from other students of color. I'm curious, what about the students who lived there who weren't students of color? Do you feel like there was special engagement, or they made it was of a value to them that they were different by the time they left the resident hall?
Al,
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't tell you, and to be frank with you, I didn't care. You know, we had HRC and I'm sure it probably did make a difference, but I wasn't, I really wasn't concerned about them.
Yeah,
I really wasn't.
that's fair. That's fair. Any other reflections, thoughts on HRC before we kind of leave this subject? Anything else you want to mention or kind of lift up that we might not have asked about?
No, not that I can. Dr. Phil Devine was the first the first RA for HRC. He was also a close brother. He was also class of 1985. So keep in mind, so just for the record, the student founders are myself and Kim Frazier.
Mm-hmm.
And Naciel Giles played an instrumental role in sort of giving us advice and sort of, helping us to sort of pointing out that, the opportunity to get the residential living center.
That's great, Tara. Do you feel like, just one last thing, when it was happening, any sense of the magnitude of what you were attempting or actually accomplishing? As I mean, I know
you asked some great questions, Al, because now you triggered something. So when we initially put this together, I'll be frank with you, I didn't know how long this thing was going to be in existence for, because I knew the concept was probably controversial. I didn't know how strong the students would be coming behind us as far as to continue to fight for the residential living center, or how much support the university would give unto it. So I wasn't extremely confident that it was going to be around for as long as it was.
Okay. Any other? I mean, if I think founding HRC is enough, but just for the record, any other major accomplishments or highlights you want to lift up before
Well, remember what I was telling you about that Farrakhan thing? Not quite Farrakhan, right? So, so Kenny and I, that was my partner in crime. So Kenny and I, we were DJs at WRCU, right? And some of the slots we had were some late night slots. So I had this Malcolm X tape, right? Where Malcolm was speaking and so forth. And I said, you know what? Let's play it on the air.
Why not?
So we put it on, those promo things that you could do. You could put it on the promo, you slide it in. Well, so that's what we did. We put it in and we just let it play. And so Colgate, during our stint, there were a couple of nights where we just played Malcolm X speeches over the air. And believe it or not, we didn't really get any pushback. I mean, we may have gotten one or two calls calling in like, is this WRCU? Say, yeah. Said, you guys are playing? They said, yes. They said, okay, this is good.
I want to ask a question about Harlem Renaissance Center in its first year. How many students lived in the first year of HRC?
Ugh,
you have a rough estimate? Just curious.
I don't. Maybe I want to say maybe. I don't know. Maybe about 30.
Okay, let me clarify. Students of color.
Yeah, I think maybe about 30. I really can't. I think maybe about that.
I mean, West Hall is still up, so we can always get a count from West Hall as to how many rooms they got there. Okay.
Yeah. Now, keep in mind, you didn't have all students of color just on the first on those two floors. You had some students of color on the other two floors as well.
Okay.
And they may not have necessarily selected HRC, but they were placed in West Hall. And I think Tracy
Hucks.
Tracy Hucks. I think she was one of the first people in HRC.
Yeah, because she's class of 87, I think 87. So she would have been coming in 83, the fall of 83. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Okay, shout out to Tracy Hucks.
Yeah.
Shout out to Tracy, Dean Hucks. Did you go on any study groups while you attended Colgate?
Oh, absolutely. And this was probably maybe outside of my marriage and the birth of my kids was one of the best experiences of my life. I went to the Zambia study group. Oh, there was 19 of us that went. I think 10 were Black, 9 were white. Tremendous. Oh, Garfield Smith. Was part of the Zambia study group. So just so you know.
Another After Gate champion. Shout out to Garfield.
Yeah. So best experience. I was actually interviewed on the Zambia radio station when I was in Zambia to sort of talk about the experience of being in Zambia. It was eye-opening. It helped me to sort of change my perspective on things. It helped me to just get a more worldly view of what's occurring in the world. I think when you travel, it opens up your mind. I think particularly if you're from New York, you have a tendency to think the world evolves around you. And when you travel and you actually go to other countries, you realize that, no, it doesn't. There's plenty of places outside. In fact, the funny thing is that when you travel, people from other countries know more about the world geographically than usually United States citizens. That's just because they just, that's what they teach them. They just teach them more about the world.
Yeah.
Was it your junior year or senior year you went on your trip?
It was actually my junior year. my junior year, and then I came back in the spring.
Nice.
So we're going to take a pause there
Mhm.
and give some love to our sponsor. And then we're going to come back and learn about who Erick is now and how he got to be where he's at right now. So this episode is sponsored by Hope Murals. Hope Murals is a nonprofit that provides adolescent youth with an interactive experience of creative expression via an urban arts platform that stimulates both mental and physical development. Please visit their website at www.hopemurals.org to learn more and find ways you can support the work they do. Welcome back. Welcome back to the second part of this conversation. We are here with Brother Erick Bowen, class of 1984. This is Aftergate Season 2. Before we get into more about his journey, would like to make sure we thank our sponsor, Hope Murals, and make sure you show them some love, hopemurals.org. We greatly appreciate all that they're doing. They are doing an amazing job exposing our youth to urban arts, infusing character development, helping them see and aspire to be a better them. So check them out, social media at Hope Murals. And again, their website is hopemurals.org. If you are interested in being a sponsor, hit us up, aftergatepodcast@gmail.com. Show some love to our network, the Defy Life Network, at www.godefylife.com. Make sure you show them some love. They actually have a podcast hub. You can find Aftergate there. You can find other dope podcasts, and that's www.defylifepods.com. Also, we were just talking about Jeff Boone. Let me make sure I give some love to one of our diehard fans, Diane Fisher. I just went through my email to find out who that person was that emailed us to also mention that Jeff Boone, class of 1985, was the first Black SGA president in his senior year. And she also mentioned he just made a run for Congress in Florida. So,
Oh wow. Okay.
Right. Shout out to Jeff Boone, class of 1985. If you're listening, we would love to hear your story as well, my man Jeff. So appreciate that. Just wanted to make sure we give Diane some love, because whenever she sees me, she reminds me that she is a listener every week. So appreciate you, Diane, and shout out to you. Now, let's get back to good brother Erick. As we just finished an amazing conversation about HRC, and as we talked about diversity, equity, and inclusion, really would like to get your thoughts on where we are now in terms of recruitment enrollment. The numbers have definitely increased in terms of the amount of students of color that are attending Colgate. That is not to be debated. The definitely a greater percentage. I think when we were there, man, it might have been like 150, 200 blacks, Latinos, Asians, Africans, all of them round up into one. We might have been like 5% of the student population. I think now
On
they
paper.
might
On paper.
on paper, right? The numbers have definitely increased is the point. But the profile of the student has
Mhm.
definitely shifted. I think the economic status of students is different. And in many cases, they are recruiting or including international students. And I think, I can speak for all of us. We want everyone to get access to this uh, educational experience, as well as what Colgate can offer you if so be it. But I don't think that's the point. I would love to hear your thoughts on that dynamic and what implications it might have for the institution and whatever else you'd like to share.
Gotcha. Well, that was actually part of my concern. Um, um, it actually started when my kids became of age to apply to college. Of course, I wanted them to go to Colgate. I wanted them to to have the same experience I had. And so my eldest son, he applied, he got in, but Colgate didn't show him any love as far as money or anything else. And plus he wanted to be an engineer, so he wound up going to Georgia Tech. But the one thing I noticed when looking through Colgate, it seemed that a lot of the student profiles is that you had a lot of people of color who were coming from outside of the country, as opposed to students of color who were from the United States. Now, don't get me wrong, and I'm going to talk to my brothers and sisters who are, who live, who came here from other countries and so forth. I'm happy that Colgate admitted them and that they're part of Colgate. But I looked at it more as if Colgate was gaming the system by them doing this, by them sort of counting their numbers as part of the diversity, In this country, I believe this country owes so much to Black and brown people who actually are from the United States. Even those who came during the 60s and even some during the 70s and so forth. If you had to live through and struggle through those periods and so forth, I think this country owes you. I think Colgate should make steps to try to heavily make sure that when they look to diversify the school, and when they're talking about Black and brown students, that they need to be mindful of the fact that you're capturing significant number of African Americans, of Latino Americans, and so forth, who actually are from the United States, as opposed to sort of filling up the ledger with people who are outside of this country, who may have had their own struggles and so forth in their own countries and et cetera, but didn't face the struggles that were here in the United States. And we're trying, and keep in mind that we're trying to correct, I don't know, like hundreds and hundreds of years of damage, of inequity that needs to be corrected for ancestors, for the ancestors of these of our people. And I just don't appreciate and that we try to do this, or that somehow it's getting sort of made as if Colgate is doing it by filling up the ledger with students who don't necessarily come from the United States. And my hope is that Colgate will when they look at the New York, when they look at the percentages of Black and brown people from the New York State, that their goal is to try to match what those percentages look like demographically. And match them significantly with people who are from the United States. Anyway, that's and I could be wrong, and maybe the numbers reflect it, but I don't get the feel of that when I look at Colgate, when I've taken a look at who the students are that are coming into Colgate, who the students of color are that are coming into Colgate. And my middle son, who came from the Coast Guard, he applied to Colgate, and Colgate rejected him, which I'm very salty about. But he wound up going to Columbia. So Colgate's loss is Columbia's gain.
Colgate's loss. Thank you for that perspective and sharing that.
So can you? Well, I'm curious. What was your major at Colgate?
I was a political science major.
Did you kind of fall into that? I mean,
No, no, I
with
always
Harlem House, I'm not surprised he was a political science major. But I'm
no,
saying,
I I kind of always knew that I wanted to go to law school from the time I was a junior in high school. Um, so technically there's no pre-law major, but political science is probably the closest to a pre-law major if there is one.
Okay, interesting. Where'd you go to law school?
New York Law School.
Excellent, excellent. Well, walk us through now. So you graduate Colgate in '84. Give us some of the highs and lows of the years that follow, and take us through memory lane with those areas you want to highlight about how you ended up in the role you are now.
Okay. All right. Well, currently, let me just start what I'm doing currently right now. Right now, I work for the federal government for the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. I'm a lead account manager, a compliance subject matter expert for the Medicare Advantage program. So let me just say that. Now, how did I wind up there? So when I graduated Colgate, I didn't want to go directly into law school. I knew that I was going to go to law school. I just wanted to live life a little bit. So, from the time I graduated till I was, I guess, 29 or 30, I first started out working in the private sector. Knew that wasn't a good fit for me because I was a public servant at heart. Then I got a job working with the Bureau of Tuberculosis for the New York City Health Department as a public health advisor. Loved that job. Got promoted all the way up to supervising public health advisor. And it was as a result, it was while I was doing that job that I decided to apply to law school. Now, I went to law school during the evening, and I worked during the day. Now, I would not recommend that route unless you're extremely serious about what you're doing. And it took me some 8 years to become extremely serious. And so that's why I was able to do what I did, because I knew that that's what I wanted to do and I would be committed to, and I put 100% of my effort into it. So I went to law school during the evening while working for the Bureau of Tuberculosis. Then I worked for the state AIDS Institute while in law school. And then I worked for Brooklyn Legal Services. And it was actually when I graduated law school in 1995, my intent was to actually, I wanted to do civil rights law, right? And I was sitting for the bar. I was getting ready to sit for the bar. And I had gotten married while in law school. My first year in law school, I got married to a Syracuse graduate, by the way. Got married. We had our first child, Miles, and he was 2 by the time I had graduated, and I was sitting for the bar. Well, just I think maybe about 2 weeks before the bar exam came out, we found that our youngest son had cancer, a very aggressive pediatric cancer. He was given like a 10% chance of living. But the doctors had told us about some experimental program at Memorial Sloan Kettering. So of course, when I found this out, I couldn't sit for the bar because I was too devastated. And so we went to Memorial Sloan Kettering, and for the next 2 years, we lived in that hospital with him. And thankfully, he's, he actually made it through. He got into remission, but because of the extreme aggressiveness of the cancer and the extreme poor pathology of the tumor, there always seemed to be a likelihood that the cancer would reemerge. That was kind of what they were showing. So anyway, so I'm saying that to say that I needed to take a job where I had good health insurance, and that also provided me with the good benefits and ability to take time off, and had great flexible hours and so forth. And so, of course, that's how I came into work for the federal government. I started working for the federal government, worked worked as in their benefit integrity area first for Medicare, and then got transferred to became the HIPAA coordinator for Medicare, and then got transferred, and then started working for the Medicare Advantage program as a lead account manager. And that was some 22 years later. And in essence, that's how I got into that position. It was really because, it's just how life works. God has a way of directing you, somewhere else, and I went to so many funerals of little kids during the time that our son was at Memorial, that it made me sort of reevaluate my life and sort of look to judge to see what was important to me. And I realized that, being with my family, being a father, that's what mattered. And so that's it. Yeah. I'm sorry, guys. I didn't mean to go there with it, but I just started remembering it, and it just started like, oh man.
Thank you for sharing.
No need to apologize, brother.
Yeah. Not at all. Glad, and just we are grateful for the blessings in terms of your son, and family. So that's great to hear.
And by the way, he's an engineer, and he's in South Dakota now. He went to
Yes.
He went to Tech. I got 4 kids. My 3 eldest are boys. My youngest is a girl. The eldest son and the youngest son are both engineers. One's in Salt Lake City, Utah, and the other one's in South Dakota. Which, my background and the type of brother I'm at, I could never imagine them being in those places.
All power to you.
Right. Good luck with that.
But they're pursuing their careers, so that's cool. That's cool.
Nice.
So this question is about just generally perspective, and curious to know, when you look at who Erick was coming into Colgate, what advice would you offer that young man as he was about to start the Colgate career? And then also looking at the Erick as he's graduating, what advice would you offer to that young man?
Okay. The advice that I would offer to Erick going into Colgate is the same advice I gave to all of my kids. Is that first year, enjoy yourself to a degree, but make sure you handle the books, and make sure that you do what you need to do, because you don't want to dig yourself into a significant hole. That would be the advice, and that's the same advice I gave to my kids, and they all were successful. At Georgia Tech, the one at Columbia is 3.7 GPA, and I got my daughter at Georgia State, and she's doing well. So yeah, that would be the advice. I mean, do the political stuff, focus on that, but handle your academics. Make sure you don't lose sight of that. That would be the advice I would give to coming in. Now, graduating, I guess if you're gonna, if you have grad school in mind, of any kind, try to pursue it right out of school. Don't wait like I did, because you want to try to do that before you have a family, if you can. Before you start building a family, you want to do those things. Also, it gives you an opportunity to take a little bit more risk, because when it's just you, you can afford to, be a little bit more riskier in terms of your career choices or in terms of what you want to do, as opposed to when you have a family, you have people depending on you.
Mm-hmm.
True that. True that. Last and final question is just an opportunity for you to promote any venture, initiative, website, opportunity that you'd like to get out to our Aftergate listeners, to this network. We just realized that this podcast also has the opportunity to leverage the collective resource that we know as the Alumni of Color.
No, I really don't, I personally don't have any ventures or anything that I'm promoting. The only thing that I would strongly encourage your listeners to do, and if they're listening, then they're doing it, but just tune into your podcast, man. You guys, this is just off the chain what you're doing. And it's just, it's really positive. And my hope is that you have current students who are listening to this, because there's just such a wealth of information you're sharing. I mean, when I went to Colgate, you're really not aware of all the opportunities out there. You just kind of know just usually the things that Colgate, that they're good at promoting. But there's so many more things that you can do with your life. And by listening to the podcast, you hear about, other people and what they're doing and how they got there and so forth. And it opens your mind. It helps you to realize that, you're not limited or restricted. And
we'll take the plug.
We'll take that plug. I'll take that all the time. Appreciate you, my man.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Any last remarks before we jump off? But I mean, I think you kind of said a lot right there. But anything else you want to share?
Nah, not really. I'm a diehard Knicks fan, just so you know.
Okay. All
Nick
right.
and the Giants fan.
Let's go.
So my hope is that we do something this year. But no, nothing else, guys. Just thank you for the opportunity. I am going to be I think you guys know this, but I'm going to be the keynote. But probably by the time this airs, this will be past.
So you'll be on my Colgate.
It'll be history. Yeah, I'm not going to Colgate. I'll be virtual. I'm going to be the keynote speaker at for their homecoming.
Okay.
And the theme of the speech is going to be making Colgate your home. So you guys kind of know what that's going to be about.
Yeah, nice. So just so you know, this is dropping on Saturday at 1300 hours. So I'm not sure when the speech is happening, but it is happening on the
Friday
same day.
night. I think it's Friday night.
Okay. So we dropping it on Saturday. So that's good. Great stuff.
All right.
So my man, I just want to thank you. I appreciate you being a guest.
Hey, Al, one quick thing.
Yes, sir.
You gotta invite me over for a barbecue, man. I've been listening, man. I heard, brother. I heard, man.
Word on the street.
I'm 20 minutes away, man. I need to get down. You know what I mean?
Done deal.
Oh, now I'm jealous. Now I'm like, yo, let me know when you coming through.
Oh no, you'll see the pictures of me and Eric. Like, yeah. Appreciate you.
They did it.
So thank you to our listeners. This has been another episode of Aftergate Season 2. Aftergate, as always, is powered by the Defy Life Network. Make sure you check us out on future shows. And you know that we are on all of your favorite podcast streaming platforms. Wherever you get your podcast, that's where we are as well. So you know there are many more dope episodes to follow. And remember, the Colgate of your day is not the Colgate of today, and it's certainly not the Colgate of the future. Peace, family.
You hear that? Listen closer. That, my friend, is the deafening sound of focus. It drowns out all the useless noise that can clutter the moment. Naysayers don't exist. Haters? Smaters? The peanut gallery? Who's that? When you in your zone, all that noise and all that buzz is just elevator music. So, enjoy your journey, focus on your goal, and bask in the quiet roar that is progress. Because when it's your time to shoot that shot, spit that verse, or close that deal, the only voice that matters is yours. Defy life.